When a struggling waitress let a disabled boy lead a simple dance step, she never imagined a billionaire dad was watching, and that moment would change her life forever. It was a cold morning, and Emily stood behind the counter of the small diner where she worked. Her hands were tired from the long hours. Her feet ached from yesterday's double shift, but her smile never left her face. The diner was warm and cozy, filled with the smell of fresh pancakes and coffee. Locals came in every day, and most of them knew her name. She greeted each one with the same kindness, asking about their families, their work, or their day ahead. Emily wasn't just a waitress. She was someone who listened when a customer needed to talk. She gave extra whipped cream to kids without being asked. She brought tea to old Mrs. Dawson even before she ordered, because she knew what she liked. People felt at home when Emily was around, but what they didn't know was how hard. Emily's life really was behind that smile. She lived in a tiny apartment with her younger sister, Lily. Their parents had died in an accident when Emily was only 19. Lily was just 13 then. Since that day, Emily had taken care of her like a mother. She gave up her college dreams and started working full-time. First it was at a grocery store, then a bakery, and finally this diner. Lily had some health issues, and the medical bills never stopped. Still, Emily never complained. She just worked harder and kept smiling because she didn't want Lily to worry. That morning, as Emily cleaned a table near the window, the door opened with a soft jingle. She looked up and saw a man walk in, tall and well-dressed in a simple but expensive-looking coat. Beside him was a boy in a wheelchair. The boy looked about 8 years old, with bright eyes and a shy smile. Didn't recognize them? They weren't regulars. She quickly walked over with 2 menus and smiled. "Good morning. Table for 2." She asked warmly. The man nodded, speaking gently. "Yes, please. Somewhere quiet." Emily led them to a booth near the back, away from the noise. She knelt beside the boy and said softly, "Hi there. My name's Emily. What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy looked at his father nervously, then back at her. "Logan," he said quietly. "Well, Logan, I'm so glad you came in today. Would you like chocolate milk or orange juice?" Logan's eyes lit up a little. "Chocolate milk." "Got it, Emily," gave him a wink and stood up. The man Richard watched Emily closely. Most people didn't talk to Logan directly. They looked at his wheelchair first, then turned to Richard to speak. But this young waitress didn't do that. She saw the child, not the chair. And for some reason that touched something deep inside. They ordered breakfast, and Emily came back and forth, checking on them with kindness that didn't feel fake or forced. Logan started to relax, even laughed a little when Emily told him a silly joke about pancakes dancing on a plate. Richard watched in quiet amazement. His son hadn't laughed like that in months. Richard Grant wasn't just any man. He was a billionaire businessman known across the country, but he was also a widower. His wife had died 3 years ago in a car crash. Since then he had thrown himself into work and into taking care of Logan. But even with all his money, he couldn't bring back his son's smile. Therapists, private tutors, luxury care, none of it brought joy to Logan's eyes. Until now, Emily didn't know any of that. To her, Richard was just a quiet man with a sweet son. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just being herself. After breakfast, when the diner became quiet for a moment, Emily noticed soft music playing from the jukebox in the corner. It was a slow, happy song. She looked at Logan and suddenly got an idea. She walked over with a napkin and said, "Hey, Logan, do you know how to dance?" He giggled. "No, I'm in a wheelchair." Emily knelt beside him again and whispered, "So what? Chairs can dance too." Logan looked confused. She reached out her hands and gently held his. Slowly, she began to sway side to side, and Logan, still sitting, moved his hands with hers. She made it fun, simple, and silly, just a few moments of pretend dancing. Richard couldn't believe what he was seeing. His son was leading the movement, smiling, laughing, not feeling different or broken. He looked like a child again, free and happy. Around them, the diner stayed calm, But to Richard, the whole world seemed to pause. That moment was magic. When the dance ended, Emily gave Logan a little bow and said, "You're a great dancer, sir." Logan beamed. Richard had tears in his eyes, but quickly wiped them away before anyone saw. They paid and left quietly. But something in Richard had shifted. He'd spent millions trying to help his son, but this young woman had done more in 10 minutes than all the expensive doctors and tutors ever had. That night, as Emily walked home in the cold, her jacket thin and her breath visible in the air, she didn't know that someone had watched her more closely than she realized. She didn't know her. Life was about to change. All she knew was that she had made a little boy smile today, and for her, that was enough. The next morning, Richard found himself driving back to the diner. He didn't plan to. It just happened. And the morning after that, he came again. Every time, Emily greeted him with the same gentle smile, talked to Logan like a friend, and made both of them feel seen. She didn't ask questions. She didn't act differently when Logan had trouble speaking or moving his arms. For her, Logan was just a boy who liked chocolate milk and silly stories, and every time Richard saw her with his son, his heart softened more. He began to wonder, who was this young woman? Why did she work so hard for so little? And how did she keep that light inside her when life seemed so unfair? Emily still had no idea who he really was, and Richard wasn't ready to tell her. But he knew one thing for sure. That moment when she let Logan lead a dance wasn't just sweet. It was powerful, and it might have been the first step in changing all of their lives forever. Richard kept coming back to the diner every morning with Logan. It started as something small, just breakfast with his son. But as the days passed, it became something more. He didn't tell anyone why he chose that diner out of all the fancy places in the city. His business partners would have laughed. Billionaire eating pancakes in a small-town cafe. It didn't fit the image. But Richard didn't care. He was a father first. After a long time, he finally saw hope in his son's eyes. He owed that to Emily. Logan, too, started looking forward to those mornings. Each day he would ask, "Are we going to see Miss Emily today?" He smiled more. He talked more. Even his physical therapist noticed a difference. "He's happier," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." But Richard wasn't doing anything special. He was just driving his son to a place. Where one person saw Logan, not his wheelchair, Emily never treated Logan differently. She talked to him like he was any other kid. She teased him gently, called him sir, like he was a knight, and always found time to share a small moment with him, even when the diner was busy. One day she folded a paper napkin into a crown and placed it on Logan's head. "King Logan, ruler of pancakes and bacon," she declared. Logan laughed so hard he snorted. Richard hadn't heard that sound in years, but while Emily was filling others with joy, her own life remained difficult. She still worked 2 shifts most days. After the diner closed in the evening, she went home to cook and care for her sister Lily, who was having trouble with her lungs. The medication helped, but it was expensive. Some nights Emily sat at the small kitchen table counting every coin in her purse, trying to stretch it far enough to cover the rent, food, and medicine. One cold evening, the sky full of gray clouds, Emily had just finished cleaning the last table when the power flickered and the rain began to fall hard outside. The lights buzzed and a few customers hurried out. The manager decided to close early. Emily tied her coat around her shoulders and stepped outside, but the wind slapped her face, cold and sharp. She hadn't brought an umbrella. Richard, who had just finished helping Logan into the back seat of his black SUV, noticed her standing under the edge of the roof, holding her arms tight. Without thinking, he got out and walked up to her. "Need a ride?" he asked gently. Emily turned surprised to see him there. "Oh no, I'm okay. It's just a little rain." Richard looked up at the sky. The rain was pouring now. "It's more than a little," she smiled, embarrassed. "I don't want to be a bother." "You're not," he said simply. She hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right, thank you." He opened the door for her, and she climbed into the front seat. Logan gave her a big smile from the back. "Hi, Miss Emily." "Hi, Your Majesty," she replied, smiling, as they drove through the rain. Richard noticed her looking out the window, quiet. She was holding her bag tightly, her fingers stiff from the cold. After a few minutes, he spoke. "You always take the bus?" Emily nodded. "Or I walk. Depends on the day." "You don't drive?" "I can't afford a car," she said with a small laugh. "Well, I had one, but it died last winter. The repairs cost more than the car itself," Richard didn't say. "Anything right away?" He felt a strange mix of feelings. Guilt, admiration, sadness. This young woman, who worked so hard and had so little, gave his son something priceless - joy. Double quotes, "Where do you live?" She told him the name of her neighborhood. It was across town, not a safe area at night. Richard frowned, but didn't say anything. When they reached her building, Emily turned to him. "Thanks again for the ride." "Really? I mean it." "No problem." She stepped out and ran inside before he could say anything more. Richard watched the front door for a moment before driving off. The building looked old, paint peeling, windows covered in plastic to keep the cold out. That image stayed with him. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, a warm fire burning behind him, holding a photo of his late wife. She had always believed in helping people. "You don't need to fix the whole world," she used to say, "just start with one person." He looked at the photo and whispered, "Maybe it's time." The next morning at the diner, Emily looked tired. Her eyes had shadows under them, and her smile didn't reach all the way. But when she saw Logan, she lit up again. "Good morning, my king," she said, placing a small paper sword next to his plate. Logan giggled. "Miss Emily," he said between bites of eggs, "I want to dance again." She laughed. "We can do that, right after breakfast." Richard watched the moment and something inside him settled. He had made up his mind. After breakfast, as Logan and Emily swayed their hands gently in a pretend dance, Richard quietly stepped outside and made a phone call. "James, it's me. I need you to look into something." He asked his assistant to find out everything about Emily, where she lived, her family, her background. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but he needed to understand more. If he was going to help her, he had to do it right. Later that day, he received the report. Her name was Emily Turner, 23 years old. Parents had died in a crash 5 years ago. Legal guardian of her 16-year-old sister, Lily Turner, who had a chronic lung condition. Medical bills unpaid. 2 jobs over the last 5 years. No criminal record. High school graduate with honors. Applied to college once for special education but couldn't attend due to finances. Richard felt something twist in his chest. She had tried to follow her dreams, but had been forced to choose survival instead. He thought of all the people who asked him for favors, deals, or shortcuts because of his wealth. And here was a woman who had done everything right and still struggled. The next day at the diner, Richard waited until the end of the breakfast rush. Then, while Logan colored quietly with a crayon Emily had given him, Richard spoke. "Emily," he said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," she said, pouring coffee into a cup. "Why didn't you go to college?" She paused. "Money. After my parents passed, I had to take care of Lily. School became a dream for later. Later kept getting pushed further away." Nodded slowly. "You wanted to study special education, right?" Her eyes lit up in surprise. "How did you know?" He gave a small smile. "Logan talks about you a lot," she laughed. "Oh, yeah. I've always loved working with kids, especially those who need a little extra love and care. Logan's amazing. He's smart and funny and brave. Kids like him, they just need someone who believes in them." Richard looked at her, really looked. There was no pride in her voice, no bitterness, just honesty. He didn't tell her that day what he was planning. But deep down, he already knew. He'd seen the truth. Emily Turner didn't just serve coffee. She served hope. She gave kindness. She gave his son a reason to smile. And soon, Richard decided it was time someone gave something back to her. The sky was dark when Emily stepped out of the diner that evening. The sun had already disappeared and the streetlights flickered weakly. She pulled her thin coat tighter around her body and began walking quickly toward the bus stop. Her breath turned to fog in the cold air, and her shoes were already soaked from the puddles on the sidewalk. But Emily didn't complain. She was used to this. At home, Lily was waiting. Her younger sister had been feeling worse lately. The medicine helped, but not completely. There were nights when Lily couldn't sleep from the pain in her chest, and Emily would stay up with her, holding her hand and telling her funny stories to make her forget. Emily had gotten good at pretending everything was okay, even when she was scared. She couldn't afford to fall apart when Lily needed her. That night, when she reached their small apartment, she opened the door and was greeted by the smell of soup. Lily had managed to make dinner. "Hey, Em," Lily said with a smile, her face pale but bright. "I made something warm. Come eat before it gets cold." Emily sat down, exhausted but grateful. They ate together quietly, both knowing how tight things were. Rent was due soon, and the landlord had already warned them. The last hospital visit had cost more than Emily earned in 2 weeks. "I'm sorry," Lily whispered suddenly. "It wasn't for me. You could have had a better life." Emily put down her spoon and reached across the table. "Don't say that. You're my family. You're the reason I get up every day and try harder." Lily nodded, her eyes watery at Emily. Spent that night worrying. She didn't know how much longer she could keep going like this. But every morning, she still woke up, put on a brave face, and went back to the diner. Meanwhile, Richard was thinking about Emily more and more. After hearing her story, after watching how she treated his son, he couldn't forget her. Emily had no idea who he really was. She just saw a quiet man and his cheerful son. But Richard saw so much more in her. He saw strength, kindness, and honesty. He saw a young woman who had sacrificed everything without ever asking for anything in. Returned one morning, Richard made a decision. He wanted to do something for her. Something real. But not in a way that would make her feel uncomfortable or ashamed. He didn't want to embarrass her or make her feel like a charity case. He wanted to understand her better first. After breakfast, he offered her a ride again. "It's okay," Emily said politely. "Please," Richard replied. "It's cold. I don't mind." It's time, she agreed. As they drove, Logan hummed in the back seat, playing with a toy Emily had given him. The car was warm and quiet, and for a few moments it felt peaceful. "Do you always work this hard?" Richard asked. Emily smiled tiredly. "I have to. Rent doesn't pay itself. Your sister Lily, right?" Emily nodded. "She's everything to me. She's been sick for a few years now. The doctors say it's manageable, but the treatment is expensive. I'm doing what I can." Richard admired her even more. She was doing all this alone. "You ever think about going back to school?" he asked carefully. "Every day," Emily said softly. "I wanted to study special education. I wanted to help kids like Logan. I even got accepted once. But life had other plans." "You would have been great at it," Richard said, and he meant it. She looked at him and smiled. "Thank you. That means a lot." They reached her apartment. And before she stepped out, Richard asked, "Can I walk you in?" Emily hesitated. No one ever asked that. Most people didn't even notice where she lived. "Okay," she said quietly. He followed her through the narrow hallway and up a flight of stairs. The walls were cracked, the lights dim. It smelled like damp clothes and old paint. She unlocked the door, and they stepped into a tiny living room. It was clean, but small. Couch with patches, a bookshelf full of secondhand novels, and a small heater in the corner. Lily sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons on a tiny TV. "Hi, Lily," Emily said. "This is Mr. Richard and his son, Logan." Lily looked up and smiled. "Hi." Richard introduced Logan, and the boy waved shyly. Emily brought out some hot tea and offered them both a seat. For a while, they talked like normal people about books, movies, and food. Richard didn't act rich. It was calm, friendly, and respectful. Emily liked that. Lily watched the way Richard looked at Emily, with quiet curiosity and something else, something kind. Later, as they left, Emily walked them to the door. "Thanks for the ride again," she said. Richard nodded. Emily. "No, this might sound strange, but you've made a big difference in my life, especially in Logan's. He's been happier since meeting you." She smiled, touched. "He's a wonderful kid." Richard hesitated, then said, "If you ever need anything, I mean anything, you can ask." Emily looked surprised. "That's very kind of you, but we'll be okay. We always manage." Didn't push, just smiled and left. That night, he sat in his office and thought hard. He knew he couldn't fix her life completely, but maybe he could remove some of her pain, not as a billionaire, not to show power, but simply as someone who had been deeply moved. The next morning, Richard had a meeting with his legal advisor. "I want to create an anonymous scholarship," he said. "Full ride, housing, books, everything. For a student who wants to study special education. Do you have someone in mind?" "Yes," Richard said, "but I want her to believe she earned it. No name connected to me. No press." "Understood." A week later, after breakfast at the diner, Emily found a small envelope left at the counter. It had her name on it. She opened it and found a letter. "Dear Emily, you've been selected for a full academic scholarship to Oak Ridge University's special education program. We believe you have the heart, courage, and dedication needed to change young lives. This opportunity includes tuition, housing, and living support. We hope you will accept and begin a new chapter where your kindness can bloom into a profession with deepest respect. The Oak Ridge Foundation." Emily stared at the letter, her hands shaking. She looked around, confused. No one in the diner seemed to know anything. Her manager shook his head. "That wasn't from us." She walked outside and saw Richard helping Logan into the car. "Did you?" she started. "Did I what?" Richard said with a small smile. Emily looked at him carefully. "Never mind." But something told her he had something to do with it. That night she cried. For the first time in years, she cried not because of pain or stress, but because of hope. Real hope. She looked at Lily and said, maybe it's finally time." Lily smiled through her weak voice. "Go for it, Em. You deserve it." Next day, Emily returned to the diner with a heart full of questions and dreams. She wasn't sure how this had happened or who had done it, but something inside her told her the world had just opened a door, and she was ready to step through. The day of the charity dance event had arrived. It was being hosted in the town's community center, a place where people usually gathered for small celebrations, school plays, and local fundraisers. This time, it was arranged to raise money for children with disabilities. The walls were decorated with colorful balloons, paper stars, and banners that said things like "Shine bright and every step matters." Tables were set up with snacks and drinks, while soft music played in the background. The room was full of families, children, teachers, volunteers, and people who just came to support the cause. Emily had helped organize the whole event. She didn't have money to donate, but she gave her time and energy freely. She helped decorate, made cupcakes, organized games, and even found someone to volunteer as a DJ. She wanted the night to be magical for every child, especially the ones who were often left out in other places. She wore a simple but beautiful light blue dress that someone had loaned her. It wasn't fancy or expensive, but it made her look graceful. Her hair was tied neatly, and she wore just a touch of makeup. Her smile, however, was the real thing that lit up her face. She looked around at all the families and children laughing, and she felt proud. After so many difficult months, she had created something joyful. Among the crowd was Richard and Logan. Richard stood near the back of the room, holding a small gift bag and wearing a thoughtful look on his face. Logan, in his wheelchair, was wearing a tiny black jacket and a silver paper crown that said "Dance King." His eyes sparkled with excitement. He'd been talking about the dance all week. "Are you ready to dance, Logan?" Richard asked. "Yes," Logan said. "But only if Miss Emily dances with me again?" Richard smiled. "I think she'll say yes." When Emily spotted them, she waved happily and rushed over. "There's my king," she said, bending down to Logan's level. "Miss Emily, will you dance with me again? Like last time at the diner?" "Of course I will," she said. "It would be my honor." The DJ changed the song. It was a soft, dreamy tune. A small space in the middle of the room was cleared for dancing. Most of the children were nervous to go first, but Logan raised his hand proudly. "Me and Miss Emily are going." He said everyone turned to look. Emily took his hands gently and led him to the middle. Instead of moving in complicated steps, she guided Logan in slow, playful motions. She'd let him lead again, just like she had that first night at the diner. His wheelchair spun slightly. She twirled beside him. Their hands moved in rhythm to the music. And most importantly, Logan smiled. A big, proud, shining smile. The room went quiet for a moment. Parents watched with teary eyes. Some clapped softly. Some whispered to each other. Richard stood there frozen, his heart full. He had seen Logan happy before, but this was different. It was a confidence, a glow, something pure, and it was because of Emily. When the music stopped, Emily bowed to Logan and said, "Thank you for the dance, Your Majesty." Logan giggled and threw his arms in the air. The crowd clapped warmly, and then more kids joined the floor. The room came alive with laughter, music, and dancing feet. But Richard wasn't watching the dance anymore. He was watching Emily, and tonight, he had decided to reveal the truth. Later that evening, when most of the children were eating snacks or doing crafts, Richard walked up to Emily. He was holding the small gift bag. "Can we talk?" he asked. Gently nodded, curious. He led her to a quieter corner of the room, away from the noise. She looked at him, unsure what was about to happen. Richard seemed nervous, which surprised her. He was always so calm. "I need to tell you something," he began. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You've known me for a while now. You know me as Logan's father. A regular man who comes to the diner." Nodded slowly. "But that's not the whole truth. My name is Richard Grant." Emily blinked. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. "I own a company called Grant International. I'm one of the wealthiest men in the country." Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak. She was too surprised. "I didn't tell you earlier because I didn't. Want you to treat me differently," he said, "and I wanted to see how genuine you were." She looked at him, still stunned. "Why are you telling me this now?" He handed her the gift bag. Inside was a letter and a certificate. Emily read the letter slowly. It was from the Oak Ridge Foundation, the same one that had offered her the scholarship. Except this time, it said something new. It said the scholarship was created by a private donor who had watched her, believed in her, and wanted to help her achieve her dreams. She looked up at Richard, her eyes wide. "It was you," she whispered. "Yes," he said softly. "You gave my son something that no one else could. You didn't do it for money or fame. You did it because of who you are. And I wanted to do something for you, not out of charity, but out of deep respect." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why?" "Me, because you're extraordinary," he said. "You work so hard. You care so much. You bring joy to others even when you're hurting. You deserve more." She stood there, shaking, trying to find words. Richard continued. "I also arranged for Lily's medical treatment. Everything's covered now. She'll get the best care." Emily gasped, her hands covering her mouth. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't ever stop being you." She laughed through her tears. "I don't know how to be anyone else." Richard smiled. They stood there in silence for a moment. Him tightly. Not as a billionaire. Not as someone who saved her life, but as a friend. From across the room, Logan watched them and smiled, not understanding everything, but knowing that something wonderful had just happened. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of hugs, dancing, music, and joy. But Emily would never forget the moment her world shifted. She had spent years thinking life was about survival, about doing what she had to do. That night, she realized that sometimes kindness comes back to you in ways you never expect. She had helped a little boy dance, and now her whole life was about to dance into a new chapter. Years passed since that unforgettable night at the charity dance. Emily's life had changed in ways she never dreamed possible. The scholarship she received from the Oak Ridge Foundation had opened doors she had only dared to imagine. The financial burden lifted. She was able to enroll in college and finally study special education, the field she had always been passionate about. Every day she sat in classrooms filled with books, lectures, and discussions, but her heart was always full of hope and determination. Her younger sister, Lily was getting stronger, thanks to the medical care arranged by Richard. The treatments were expensive, but now affordable, and Lily's health had improved greatly. Emily was no longer exhausted all the time. She had moments to breathe, to dream, to live, despite all the changes. Emily never forgot where she came from, or the kindness. That had transformed her life. She stayed humble, always remembering the struggles she had faced, and the people who still faced them. She wanted to give back not just through words, but through action. During her studies, Emily met other students and professors who shared her passion. They encouraged her to start a project, something that would combine her love for dance with her desire to help disabled children. Dance had been the spark that lit Logan's smile. Emily believed it could do the same for many others. With the help of her college and the Oak Ridge Foundation, Emily began to organize dance workshops for children with disabilities. The workshops were designed to be inclusive and joyful, focusing on movement, expression, and confidence. Kids of all abilities came to learn, to play, and to dance. Emily's warmth and patience made every child feel special. Logan was a regular participant, and his progress amazed everyone. With therapy and determination, he learned to stand with the support of braces and walkers. The day he took his first steps on the dance floor was one Emily and Richard would never forget. Logan's face was glowing with pride and happiness as Emily gently guided him through the steps. Richard continued to support the foundation quietly. He never sought recognition or publicity. For him, the greatest reward was seeing Logan smile and watching Emily help others do the same. Their bond grew deeper, not just as father and caregiver, or teacher and student, but as friends who had shared a journey of healing and hope at one of the foundation's annual events. Held in a large hall filled with families, children, and supporters, Logan led Emily in a dance once more. The music was lively, and the crowd cheered. Logan's steps were steady, his confidence shining. Emily smiled brightly, proud of how far he had come. After the dance, Richard approached Emily. "Look at what you've done," he said softly. Emily shook her head, eyes moist. "We did this together. Logan, you, me, all of us." Smiled. "Thank you for believing in him and in all of us." Your story became an inspiration to many. It showed how kindness, courage, and simple acts of love could change lives forever. Emily's journey from a struggling waitress to a college graduate and foundation leader was proof that dreams could come true. Even against the toughest odds, she often thought back to that first day at the diner when she had held Logan's hands and let him lead a dance step. That moment was small, but powerful. It was the beginning of a new life for all of them. And as the music played and children laughed around her, Emily knew that the dance would never end. It was just the start of a beautiful, ongoing story of hope, love, and endless possibility.